at the end, you're not living up to the ideals of Agile at all. Working software over comprehensive documentation. If it's not working, you're not doing it right. Period.
Absolutely. Welcome everybody to another episode of Real Agile or BS. I'm your host, Peter Saddington at AgilePeter, and with my colleague at AgileBob, Bob Hartman from Agile for All. We are always here to answer your questions, frequently asked questions about whether something is real Agile or BS. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about something that might be a little hairy, but let's get into it. It's hardening sprints. So first and foremost, Bob, tell us, what's a hardening sprint?
Well, to be honest, Peter, I'm not quite sure I know. I've been told by teams that do it is they do all of their work, and at some point they have to make sure that it all is really good and solid. And so they have a sprint where they're just basically fixing bugs and hardening things. And to me, I just hear the whole concept and I say, how is that not part of your regular sprints? Why are you actually needing something later to fix bugs and harden things, whatever this harden word means? And I'm saying this facetiously a bit because I do understand what hardening is. In the waterfall world, you need to harden the things you've created at the end because we haven't paid attention to quality along the way. But if we're doing hardening sprints, we're not getting to a definition of done that's meaningful at the end of every sprint or iteration. And so I'm going to start us off by saying complete and utter BS as far as agility goes. Create your definition of done, do it well, live up to that definition of done every single sprint, and you should get rid of the need for hardening sprints. It's as bad as saying let's have, and this may tick some people off, but design sprints, analysis sprints. At what point do we start saying that we're sprinting in a waterfall fashion? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Absolutely. The first time that I ever came up across the word hardening sprint was with one of my clients. It's a large telecommunications company, and their hardening sprint was essentially a QA sprint. And so we were running in the beginning a 3-week sprint. So we know we could have done better, but starting off with a 3-week sprint, and then they had a hardening sprint, which was the 4th sprint, which was just basically QA. And so what emerged from that, and this was really a novel idea from my client. What emerged from that is that we're not splitting stories, number one, small enough so that we can actually create some functional units of value. And number two, our organizational design was off. We weren't aligning teams. We weren't aligning the QA teams or the development teams to work more together throughout the process. So we didn't need to have a handoff in a hardening sprint. So this was something that confounded me the first time I heard of it. I was like, what's this hardening sprint idea all about? They're like, oh, it's just QA. It's like, well, it sounds a lot like waterfall. It sounds a lot like the old world. And so that was my first foray into this hardening sprint. And over time, it actually took us, if I'm honest, I think about 6 or 7 months to finally move away from that and start integrating QA, UAT, all the testing earlier into the sprint. And again, that was done by 2 things: splitting stories to be smaller so we could get to a useful definition of done, or a definition of done where we could actually deploy some value. And number 2, realigning the chairs on the deck per se, and having QA integrate earlier on so we didn't have to do a handoff into a hardening sprint, which in many cases, when we were handing it off to the QA, the development teams were basically just twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the QA engineers to say, yeah, this is wrong. Here's a bug. Go fix it. And so that was a huge kind of a momentum killer in a lot of ways. And so one of the things that we suggested, this is what they ended up doing, is integrating the QA with the development and breaking things down smaller. So yes, I would completely agree with you. When it comes to any type of hardening sprint, it's just an excuse for poor organization. It's just an excuse for poor alignment within your organization. Would you agree?
I agree. And it's interesting that you said this happened at a large client, because I think every time I hear hardening sprint, it goes with large client somewhere in the same sentence. So maybe there's something to that. But the other question I always ask, Peter, is what is their velocity during their hardening sprint? Imagine asking that question. What kind of looks would you get?
Well,
it's just,
the answer probably is
you're
zero.
doing a sprint. Yeah, if you're doing a sprint and you can't figure out how to determine your velocity, you're probably doing it wrong.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Absolutely. So for everyone out there, when it comes to hardening sprints, let us know some of your ideas. How have you guys overcome hardening sprints? What are some of your questions about hardening sprints? Because certainly AgileBob and myself can't cover everything here, but we do agree 100% here, AgileBob, that it is BS. Any other last comments before we let them off?
Well, I think we just have to give them some insight and say, look at your organizational structure, as you mentioned. Are your teams actually integrated properly? And look at your definition of done. Are you actually getting things to a state where they can be done at the end of a sprint and can deliver value? And remember that potentially shippable part of, potentially shippable product increment. If it's not potentially shippable, if you have to harden it at the end, you're not living up to the ideals of Agile at all. Working software over comprehensive documentation. If it's not working, you're not doing it right. Period.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because I can think of, and I can't match the faces right now, but I can think of so many voices that have come up in the past when it's a client or a class of someone saying, well, Peter, our organization is so large, it's so fractured, it's so et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's just no way that we can, integrate everything. And so again, it's one of those ideas where a good scrum master or a good coach or whoever's out there, whatever position you're in, start asking those questions to your organization, start asking your questions to your teammates, to your management, and say, hey, how can we improve this? Because if there's no way to measure it in terms of velocity, I really like the fact that you brought that up, Bob, then we're not creating any value here. We're actually creating potentially delay and cost. Cost is being incurred there. And so for everyone out there, let us know. Let us know some of your comments, your ideas of how you overcome this, or if you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. But I think we're all in agreement here. Hardening sprints is not real Agile. You guys let us know if you disagree. Thanks for joining us in today's episode. Smash the like button, subscribe, and again, let us know if you have any questions or comments. We'll see you guys next time.